Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Anna, wait until we're invited.
Oh, for God's sake, Kelly, get the hell in here.
Abby, can I take Joy to our house?
Where are your sisters?
I can't find them.
Wait, I checked the entire house. They're not here.
Dad, there was this RV, and they were playing on it. We thought there was someone inside.
Put those girls somewhere, Alex. No. I know you put those girls somewhere.
He stays in custody until my daughter's found, right?
We have a 48-hour hold on. It ends tomorrow unless we bring charges.
We'll charge him with something. Day 6, and every day she's wondering why I'm not there.
What in the world did you do?
Someone has to make him talk, or they're gonna die. I know you know where they are. Where's my daughter?
Welcome to the show, everybody. It's the next reel. It's a film board, and it's very special, very, very special. It's a special kidnapping episode of the film board. We're thrilled that you have downloaded, and we hope that you have seen this movie, Prisoners. We're talking about Prisoners tonight. My name is Pete Wright, and we are here with, let's see, who's on the board? We've got the surly but darkly charming Mike Evans.
Why, thank you very much.
We've got Andy Nelson. He's here.
Yeah, it's me.
Maybe he's the potentially absentee Andy Nelson. And
can I be captivating tonight?
You can be captivating, and the captivating Steve Sarmento. Steve, always a treat to have you on these things. So, all right. So, we are going to be talking about Prisoners tonight. We have seen it. This is another one. I feel like I may be an island in this conversation. And let's just say, can we get it out of the way? We're going to spoil this film. That's what we do. We spoil the films. So get ready. If you haven't seen Prisoners yet and you don't want to be spoiled, again, step away from your internet sound machine and go see this movie and then come back. Now, who would like to give us a little bit of a backgrounder on the film?
I think Steve said he was going to.
Yeah, I can do that. Well, so in terms of background, I was going to start with the fact that this was a script that was on the 2009 Blacklist, which is a list of the best unproduced screenplays. So it was floating around for a while, got some attention. There were a lot of different people that were attached to this project before it settled on this current cast, which includes, of course, Hugh Jackman and Jake Gyllenhaal. And I noted that I think at its runtime of 2 hours and 26 minutes, this is one of the longest films the Film Board has reviewed. And in keeping with the way we normally do this, it's probably going to mean we're going to have a 2-hour conversation.
Or it's only going to be 15 minutes. It's actually an inverse relationship.
There we go. But I think if I was going to sum this whole thing up, it really comes down to asking the viewer whether or not they really believe in the idea of the end justifies the means, or if you're more of the bent of asking yourself the question, what shall it profit a man if he gains the whole world but loses his soul? And it's some really heavy philosophical topics, I think, that come to play in this film about what a father will do when his daughter is abducted from him and the lengths that he will go to and the consequences, and how this community is really all drawn into this really complex web throughout this story.
That's pretty good. Yeah. Good job.
I'm trying to keep us under the 2 hours.
No, that's good. You're jumping right into it.
Was that 100 characters?
No,
we'll be tweeting that later. How many stories do we have woven in here? We have the kidnapping story, right? We have the kidnapping story, which is really surrounds Hugh Jackman and his family, and Terrence Howard and his family as their daughters are abducted. We have the detective story, which weaves in the sort of the mazes, and they come together in how would we define how the perpetrators kind of weave into the detective and kidnapping stories? There is that. I don't know if this is kind of a point of weakness, but it seems like there is that third story about the father and the discovery of him in the house and the mazes. So where would you like
mean the
to?
Father, like the priest?
Yeah, the father,
okay.
The priest. Yeah, right, Padre.
Well, I think just on that piece of it. So there's the I don't know. You could say there's the obvious what you get from the trailer, right? That there's a kind of what would you do, to rescue your daughter type of thing. How far would you go? And then there's the cop thriller, and then the last piece of it is I think the more subtle is like how dark even the people who are supposed to not be that way can be, right? And it's sort of salt and peppered all throughout the thing. You can start uncovering little things that are not germane necessarily to the main storyline, but are evidence of other people who have gone through that sort of decision process to different results or to similar results in some way.
Yeah, I think without spoiling at this point specifically, there's this child abductor, this character, and there are several stories that we come across. If you go back in time a little bit in this community, there you can see these ripples back through the impact of abduction and the impact it has on these people's lives. We have the detective going to visit, a woman whose son was abducted 26 years ago, and sort of we can see how that's affected her life.
Right.
And everything, sort of spools out from this central, sort of story of these child abductions. And it was really interesting to see how they sort of interacted with each other. But it got me thinking about how those consequences and those impacts really were played out in different scenarios, sort of the different results and different paths these people ended up on as a result of their sort of the impact of the abduction on their lives. Because we talked about Hugh Jackman and Terrence Howard, which is the current abduction, but we've got the woman that's interviewed, and there's also another character that we come across that has been abducted at one point and has escaped, and sort of what that has done to his life. Even there's a book that's found as a piece of evidence, I believe, and that relates into this as well. So there were a lot of different threads coming back, as I see it, all to this sort of central child abductor figure. And it was. Go ahead.
Sorry. Oh, I was gonna say, and I don't know if I would separate the cop story from this element of the story that we're talking about with this, the mystery about the various abductions that have been happening in this community over the last, at least we know 26 years. In a way, I mean, that really is kind of what a cop detective thriller is all about. I mean, look at Silence of the Lambs. Yes, you're following the story of the detective and of the kidnapper, but I don't know if I would separate those out as two separate stories as much as, the story of the parents dealing with their grief and dealing with their own way of feeling they need to, do their own detective work to find their missing daughters.
Well, I think you can in just one aspect of it, which is a point of view. So sometimes you're in the parents, though, more focused on the one main father, Keller's point of view. You're kind of following him around, and then you're also following the detective around. I think that's why it almost by default
I'm not disagreeing with that.
Yeah.
I'm saying that there's not three stories. I'm saying it is just the two stories. I wouldn't separate the other perpetrators as a third story, I think, which was something that Pete had kind of brought up initially.
Well, it wasn't even about, Andy, I mean, I see your point. It wasn't really about the third perpetrator, and it's hard or it wasn't about the perpetrator of this but more the story of the multi-generational abduction, family abduction drama, where we end up introducing these other elements. And I think you're right. By the end, it sort of wraps up and we realize where all these connections are made. And it really is. I mean, it ends up being sort of two stories. But for much of the film and much of the second act, it feels like three. and I think I could go either way. That there's the Hugh Jackman character when he is, when he's in at home mode, trying to adjust and be a part of his family, but he can't be a part of his family. And there's the Hugh Jackman when he's out on, I'm the hunter mode, I think we see some really interesting dynamics in his portrayal of this father. But and then we have the police drama. So,
but I think you have a valid point, just from the stand of it's a not a full point, not a fully formed point of view, but it's a distraction. So like you're focused on the kidnapping, and then you're focused on the detective aspect of it, and then literally every time he goes and talks to somebody, the detective goes and talks to somebody, you get a little storiette, like a little small little vignette of a story that you're like, oh, well, what's going on over there? Like, is that germane or is it separate? It's not, like you said, it does tie it all in at the end, but during the movie, it's sort of this extra piece, this extra storylines that you're kind of having to maintain in your head.
But does that make it a distraction, or does that make it a more complex thriller, which is, I mean, let's be honest, as a theater-going audience in 2013, I mean, when it comes to telling a thriller of any sort, we want to have that complex story because we are much more of a mature audience than we were, 10 or 50 or 100 years ago when we get these stories, and we want those complexities because we need to have those twists and turns in order to really make it a compelling thriller that drives us through to the end. So when the big reveals happen, it makes it that much more engrossing for us.
So let me, you're probably right in general. From my standpoint, from a just viewing standpoint, they were throwing distractions throughout the whole movie, in my opinion. Right now, I think that a lot of it could have just been chaff to try to make it so you kind of had to work and pay attention. Like for one of my big examples would be the dialogue between the police chief and the detective. I don't think it really resolved anything. I didn't understand where the conflict came from. Like there was no backstory with the detective to explain why there was that sort of relationship with the police, and it never got resolved with his boss, and it never got resolved. Like, well, I didn't understand why they were focusing on it so much.
Well, I think that was just more pure character development. I mean, that was like, there's backstory elements there that I don't think they need to introduce for us to find the character relationship very interesting.
Well, and that was an issue for me too, but in this case, a positive one. To me, I felt like what we were seeing in that relationship is a sense of ownership of the case, and I think I needed to see that from Gyllenhaal's character as a detective. That we've already heard through dialogue that he's never not solved a case. Right. And now we get to see demonstrated why through their interaction because of this sort of deep ownership. To me, I felt like that added to his character, which was otherwise just, a series of him, of scenes of him either watching other people or, blinking rather heavily.
Well, and maybe I just didn't understand why it was that way because it didn't impress upon me. That for me, it felt like during the movie there was just unresolved, like they didn't explain it.
There's a little bit in there if you pay attention very carefully, and it may come out more in a second viewing because it is, as you said, there's a lot of distractions, so it's hard to sort of know which little pieces of information are things that you really need to hold on to, and it didn't click for me until after there's a scene later on where there's a suspect that they have and that ends up shooting himself, and there's a scene where where Detective Loki is there, and the captain says basically to him, well, there goes your chance with PSP, with the Pennsylvania State Police. And I think there was something earlier on in one of the early scenes where there was a brief exchange where it's suggested that Detective Loki is trying to get promoted out of sort of that small town up to the level of the state police. And so I think there's a little bit of that animosity of the captain holding him back. He's got some ambitions towards something larger. And so he wants to do this his way so he can get this case solved because he knows he can do it, but he's got to get it done his way because he's the guy that never, doesn't solve a case. And I think that's that dynamic. And it's not something that's really played up in some dialogue that was really obvious, but I think on a second viewing, you may be able to track that thread a little bit more clearly.
And I think that's something that they do smartly through the whole film. Both the writer Aaron Guzikowski and the director Denis Villeneuve, when they are very smart about the way that they disperse information. I think it's one of those films that I feel like they're very assured in how it was written and how it was directed and how it was acted, where they didn't have to spell everything out for the audience. I mean, even leading up to the ending, I won't jump into how it ends yet, but I just feel like they know enough to give the audience what they need, or for the most part, I guess maybe not for everybody, since it's not it didn't click with Mike, but I think in a for everybody but Mike. No.
Yeah.
I've watched these type of movies before, right? At the end of the movie, you start ticking off things in your brain. Oh, that's how. Oh, yeah, that's why they did that. Oh, that's why they did that. It all kind of closes itself up, right? And that's what got me was it wasn't early in the movie because once you sort of settle into the pace and you understand what they're kind of doing, you kind of get it. Like they showed. They made when they're doing the shots, they made it on purpose to show all of his tattoos on the Detective Loki. At almost there's one on his neck. There's a cross on his one hand. There's weird symbols on the knuckles of his other hand, and it seemed like they were trying to say something, or like it was trying to lead to something later. And I felt that was something else that just never got wrapped up cleanly. Like why? Why did they make such an effort to show that stuff off? And so that's one of those things. The relationship is just sort of like, oh, it just didn't seem like it was resolved obviously. But maybe I don't have the horsepower to figure it out. It's also possible.
I agree actually, and there were a number of points that I think were that I wanted a little bit more exposition or demonstration of what these things were, and in part I don't feel like the tattoos were explained. I feel like there is some sort of a tie between the tattoos on his fingers, which my understanding is they're astrological symbols. And his name and Loki and the role of Loki in Norse astrology is the trickster god, and what is that role? I didn't see that connection on screen. Like I didn't have any sense that there was a demonstration or a deeper meaning to Jake Gyllenhaal's performance as this character and how this character sort of was how those elements were important to his portrayal. I didn't see that connection. I wanted
and he also had the dialogue with the lady in the Chinese restaurant.
Yeah, which was ultimately unresolved. Like I feel like there was that little pepper of dialogue there, which is great, and then we didn't really see much more from about that. And so and I haven't read the script yet, Steve. I know you said you read the screenplay. Andy, have you read it too?
I have not.
Okay, so Steve, you made some comments about some, they made some choices in the the film that deviated from the screenplay that you read. Was there any sense that more of these things were resolved in the screenplay and that they may have cut them in production?
Not specific to Detective Loki. There was actually regarding any of those issues. No, there's some things later on towards the end with some of the other characters. One thing with Hugh Jackman's character at the Thanksgiving dinner, there are in the script there's a lot of specifically descriptions of him drinking glasses of milk, so that everybody else is drinking wine or whatever, and he's drinking milk, so that later on when Detective Loki is following him and confronts him outside the liquor store, and he says, "Oh, I haven't had a drink in 9 years," it may have been that again, suggesting that he maybe had a drinking problem at one time, or and again, which plays into a conversation that he has with his son at one point about, his son is very upset with him because he's gone, and his son thinks he's just sort of fallen off the wagon again, is out drinking all the time. And so because of that lack of sort of focus on him avoiding alcoholic beverages early in the film, it didn't come across as much in the film. Well, so that was just, was it strong enough in there?
I think so. I mean, I got that when he said I haven't had a drink in 9.5 years or something like that, and then his son said he's out drinking. I mean, I got what they were saying, is that the assumption was that he had lost control and he was out drinking. When obviously you're like, no, he wasn't.
Oh, see, because I took the line as he's just feeding Loki a line because he's trying to throw him off the trail of why he's really out in that part of town.
Right.
But
yeah, I actually bought the alcohol because it just seemed like sort of a predictable thing. And, of course he's got an alcohol problem. That's kind of par for the course.
He's an angry man.
Yeah, he's an angry former drunk. I get that.
Yeah.
And not to be, I'm not one to shy away from calling out things that I feel like I got. And there were a lot of things in this movie that I didn't get that were pleasant surprises to me that I really liked. But the other thing that I felt was undeveloped and was probably the biggest disappointment for me in the film is the use of mazes. And I think that plays into the Loki references, and this idea of tricks and tricksterism and having to use that set of wits to uncover this particularly nasty maze thing. But the maze thing ended up being a MacGuffin in this film, right? I mean, was there any sort of larger tale apart from the fact that one of the creepy guys has a lot of mazes on those walls?
Well, I don't know if I'd call it a MacGuffin. I mean, it's an integral clue to figuring out the case for Loki.
But it could have been anything.
But not in a maze.
It could have been anything.
Exactly.
No, yeah.
They didn't use it as maze, like maze theory and those things. They used it as that symbol looks like that symbol.
Right, and I know there was a book that was brought up later about that somebody had referenced about Lost in the Maze or Breaking Free from the Maze or something like that.
And she had said if you finish all the mazes, you can go home.
Yeah, right. But there was an actual published book that somebody brings up at some point. I can't remember where that book was or that somebody had referenced.
It's in the house with the mazes drawn all over the walls, and it's suggested that it's an actual book of a guy who. It was a detective that wrote a book about some, child abductor called that he named the Invisible Man because it was like some either unsolved case. And so it was, the thought was that this person had read that book and was basically like a copycat. And so that's because the mazes that he had were photocopies of mazes that were in that book, the detective's book.
Right. He hadn't come up with any of his own original mazes even. That's right.
And the key point was the last maze was unsolvable.
Right.
And I thought that little piece,
which was the maze that the guy had on his neck and the maze that the guy was drawing, correct?
Yes.
That was the unsolvable one.
Yes.
I don't know about that. All I know is that I got the impression that I got the impression that was sort of thrown out. That was another of those pieces that was thrown out that did not lead to anything, or maybe it was a tie back to the thing where it says if you finish all the mazes you can go free. Well, guess what? The last one's unsolvable. You're never going to go free.
Can I just clarify for me? Andy? I think that you just said the maze that was on the guy's neck. Are you talking about the amulet, or a tattoo, or the tattoo on Loki? Well, that wasn't a maze, right? I just want to feel like I didn't miss it.
Well, no, I'm talking about the. I mean, I guess we're kind of entering spoiler territory if we're talking about the specifics.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so we're in spoiler territory. It's the necklace that's on the dead body in the priest's basement. I guess you're calling it an amulet. I think of an amulet as having a big jewel on it. But
all right, well, medallion.
Medallion.
His bling.
His bling. There you go.
His
corpse bling. All right, I just wanted to clarify. Make sure I didn't miss something.
His teeth back. He had a nice
grill
to
go with his bling. Maze grill. So okay, so that makes sense to me. But you see what I'm saying? This to me, and it sounds like you guys didn't read this way. To me, this is a gun on the mantelpiece discussion. That they made such a big deal about mazes as being an integral part of this puzzle that when we get to the resolution of the kidnapping, there are no mazes involved. It is the mazes are done. And so the symbols of the mazes ultimately are clues, milestones just to tie these things together, tie these disparate elements of the case together for Jake Gyllenhaal, but ultimately don't have any sort of resonance with us as viewers. And my problem with that is really quite specific. Because they chose a maze, which has its own vernacular and symbolism in itself, there comes a set of expectations with the maze that we need to see resolved. And for me, you know, we have an expectation that the maze introduces a new set of complexity or complexities to the final resolution of the case. And when it doesn't pay off that way, that ends up coming at a deficit to the overall story arc. And that really is my ultimate problem with the way the film resolves.
Well, no, and I agree with Pete because I thought at some point they were going to do the excavation of the house, and underneath the little house was going to be like this huge caverns set up in a maze format or something because when he finally gets a little bit of admission out of Alex, I guess try to keep it as spoiler-free as possible, in the condition that Alex was in.
Yeah, we're done with that.
Yeah. So he finally squeaks out a little bit. They're in the maze. Right?
Right.
That doesn't... I still don't know what that translates to.
Okay.
What does that mean? Is that what
can
the
I pull this together for you guys?
Is that what the mom called?
Go ahead, Uncle Steve.
Okay. So here's the thing. So you've got sort of the original abductor, who's the corpse down in the underneath the church,
right, and his wife, right,
and his wife. So he's got that.
Team.
Yeah, he's got his medallion or whatever that has this pattern on it, which is an unsolvable maze. So the two of them have been abducting kids, and they have basically, a book of mazes. I'm getting that they give the kids is something to do and tell them, hey, when you can solve all the mazes, you can go free. Why do I think that? Because Bob, who is this copycat who's basically replicating the consequences of his, the situation of his own abduction, because he's got, kids' clothes, he's got the snakes, which we find out later on, that he's basically recreating what happened to him. And since he's got a book like that, I think, okay, he's got a book like that. That's something they did to him. The girls are there. I think there's in that room, we actually see that they've got that book there with them in the room where we see the two girls. So it's something that, is an activity that the kids are given, but now for Alex, who we find out was an abductee, being in the maze is, sort of living in that, in that house with, they're stuck in there. They can't escape. And for Bob, it's messed him up so bad. It's just scarred him emotionally. So it's not, I would have been extremely disappointed if there was a literal maze in the house. It's something that, is keeping these kids occupied. It's just messing with their heads, creating this false sense of hope that they'll one day be able to escape. And this couple is probably one of the most sinister couples I've ever seen in a film. Their motives are just so dark and twisted. It is, it's just the puzzle of them and what the consequences are.
And I completely agree with that. I mean, that was for me the maze in this film was this mental torture that these people put these children through, and not just the people or the children, but also, by virtue of the children being abducted, the families as well, and it's the whole mental maze that a parent has to go through then to fight with their own religious beliefs and all that. So for me it was all about mental mazes, and if they brought an actual physical maze into this film, I would have totally thought that they failed as filmmakers, because it would have been so on the nose and just a cheap Hollywood ploy to bring in an element into the film that just felt so obvious.
No, and I want to make clear, I also agree with that. It would have been a failure to introduce a physical maze. That would have been nonsense, right? There are very few movies that handle physical mazes well. And in this case, that's not the failure I'm calling out. To me, the weakness is they chose the maze in the first place. It's a metaphor that doesn't work because to me, it does not work for me because it comes with its own sense of symbolic weight that they did not play off significantly enough in this film in the way I saw it. And don't get me wrong, it feels like I'm setting this up to say I really hated this film because of that. That to me ends up being a minor grievance, where I think for Mike it sounds like it was much more significant, or at least part of it.
No. I agree with you. So the point is, I'm not saying it should have been. I said it's one of those things that it felt like they introduced it as a concept in the movie, but did not play it all the way through to where you really understood. Like you can justify or rationalize why mazes were used as a terminology, but when and I wasn't sure whether or not the little medallion that the guy was wearing was an actual maze or if it was like like Native American art, which isn't mazes. I didn't understand if it was really meant to be. I'm pretty sure that Loki does reference the maze that Bob is drawing on the table as the unsolvable maze from the book, which is the medallion that the guy's wearing. Right. So I'm pretty sure it is the unsolvable maze that he has on his neck. Okay, so I didn't know if it was actual or if it was just sort of like related to, but either way, it was like the maze terminologies I don't felt was fully fleshed out in the film, so that it was. Maybe it just. I feel like you have to jump to conclusions to make that relation.
Well, there's a lot of areas in this film where it's going to ask you to jump to conclusions. I mean, what I find interesting about it is they ask Bob to draw a map of where the kids are, and that's what he draws because he's still in the maze. I mean, this becomes a very much a frame of mind of being trapped by this couple, even if you're physically escaped as he has. He's still trapped in this maze. He is. In a place mentally where he's never going to return to his normal life. Well, and I think that's
so just to wrap up my piece of this, right? I did not get the impression that the couple were they never sort of put them or introduced them or sort of set them up to be maze builders or to be of that. I'm not going to say mental level, but I'm saying of that particular level where that is what you would get out of it. What you got out of them was that they lost a kid, they lost their son, and they're blaming God, and they're taking it out on everybody in the world.
Right.
And I didn't get the impression that they were like crazy maze building people that they've introduced. That it's almost like they threw a book and. They knew the kids wouldn't be able to do it at the end, and this is Alex and Bob. This is what they did. This is what it did to them.
Right.
The result. The only two examples that we have of people who have survived these two people. This is what it's messed them up enough because they threw this book at them. That's my
hearing you say that, I mean, there's this sort of new element of depth that I'm kind of seeing, which is the sense that. What I do like about this is the kids, now we have the copycat and Alex, their interpretation takes on a magnified sense of importance in the mazes. Even though the parents were just throwing these might have been just throwing these books at them, the kids sort of, that's just what kids do. You're always sort of surprised as you look at your kids and think, what are the things they're taking from me as a parent and making much bigger than was, than I would give my own sense of importance to that thing.
Absolutely, it becomes
their world, and I recognize that. I think that's an angle I hadn't considered. So that's good.
Well, because
I call that a win.
She proves them to be very indelicate. Basically, that whole dialogue between her and Keller at the end near the end of the movie, where she's, she is not a. I mean, you can tell she's been doing this for a long time, and she knows what to do. She knows how to handle it. I thought that just to get off on performances, I thought her performance at the end was amazing. How she was pacing it, and controlling this guy who could obviously, kick her butt, and he had a gun in his thing that she found later, and she was able to, through minutia and sleight of information and things like this, and was able to control him amazingly, right? But that's the part. I never got the fact that these people were masterminds. I got the impression that these people were just deranged.
Angry at God and determined to kill everybody else.
Well, and that is one of the really powerful lessons of this film, I think, which is or messages, which is interestingly using them as an example of the power of faith, right? They are exercising their power of faith against God and against the message of God, and they're doing it in, as Steve says, an incredibly dark way. Which is I think a wonderful illustration of how to get this sort of message of the power of faith across. I found it fascinating.
Well, and I think you pair that with Keller and his performance. I mean, he is a very much a God-loving man. I mean, he's got his cross. He's listening to the Christian stations, and he very much is in that world. We hear him saying the Lord's Prayer a number of times before he, at the very beginning, also when he's in the midst of his torture, and so we get that sense. But at the same time, he is very much a man who, while having a great faith in God, also because he's kind of this, this survivalist, this prepper guy who kind of has his stash in the basement to prepare for the end of times. He really is also just all about himself and knowing how to, knowing what he needs to do to survive himself. He doesn't just rely on God. And so I thought that was an interesting balance between them and their, anti-faith stance, and him and in the faith of himself and God to survive.
Well, and that's the context, or that's the sort of complex contrast of the film, that his faith drives him to do some incredibly dark things.
Right.
Well, okay, so my comment, I had written something down for that said, and I thought about this a couple of times, because his thing several times was be prepared for anything.
It's pray for the best, prepare for the worst.
Right. Yeah. And what's interesting is pray for the best, right?
Right.
Because I got the impression that what he wasn't prepared for was what turns out to be a massive conflict of faith.
Right. That's
right.
I think that's a great observation. I think that's a real strength of his character, is being able to play that off.
I mean, he was prepared for the end of socialization. He's telling his son that things may go, and what's funny is he tells his son, things may go, people may be at each other's throats and things, that you got to be prepared. And
yeah, it's going to be you. You're going to be the only thing who can stand between your life and death, or whatever he says.
Exactly. And what you notice is that he has no ability to control his own self when he is outside the realm of normal operation, right? Like, he doesn't know what to do. You see him several times praying, for direction, praying for understanding, forgiveness, but doesn't stop him. I mean, he just literally he's like a pinball. He whatever he needs, whatever takes him, he's in direct line, because remember, he's told everyone, I will protect you, and you can tell he's not. He's just become completely unhinged.
Well, and I think it's all in that line: pray for the best, but prepare for the worst. I mean, that is almost like the yin yang within him. It's the prayer that he's going to be able to handle things, on kind of that faith-based plane that he operates. But preparing for the worst, I mean, that means you're doing some dark stuff in that world,
Yeah.
And that was, to me, the real interesting path they took with the character of Keller. Of he's making some pretty convincing arguments at the beginning. When he's abducted Alex, he's got him locked up, and he's trying to tell Terrence Howard, we've got to get an answer from him. And he's like, it could be this other guy. How do you know it's him? And he says to him, our girls are out there, and if you're thinking about letting him go, know that nobody is watching out for our girls the way you're watching out for this guy right here that we've got. And it's like, okay, yeah, we've got to be tough because our kids are important to us. And it's like, okay, and even Terrence Howard, the wife played by Viola Davis. You know, she's on board with this for a while, and then it finally gets to the point where they just sort of wash their hands of it and say, we're not going to participate in this anymore, but we're not going to stop him.
Right.
You know, they're not willing to go that far.
Which makes them complicit, which is what, I think that's one of the things I really like about that. Like she's acknowledging her, that she's complicit in it by walking away.
It was a really interesting role comparison for her with this and Doubt.
Yeah.
Because it was very much the same reaction that she had in that film.
But what's really interesting is by the end of the story, after you track everything through, it is the film takes the stance the film takes is the end justifies the means, because only because Keller abducted Alex were they able to actually were those children able to be saved. If he hadn't taken Alex, those kids probably would have died. But because he did that, and every consequence that happened as a result of that is what leads to the end of the film.
I have two things that I've been dying to mention about that. First one's pretty simple. When you look at the four parents, so the one that was most morally clean was the one that was basically whacked out on Valium the whole movie.
Right.
Right. She didn't have
completely given up.
Yeah,
right.
Well, she'd given up. She'd given up very early, and she had. Which in the
what is that?
Movie,
but wait,
like,
what does that equate to, Mike? Does that equate to her losing faith? I mean, do we extend? Is that too on the nose for our faith argument?
But I don't know. I don't know if I don't think they ever talk about faith with her, right? I know what you're trying to say, and maybe I just haven't thought it through. But she basically surrenders to the loss and surrenders to the moment, and she's not fighting it.
Well, I do think we should be fair real quick, just to interject and say there is level of change. I mean, initially it's denial, and it builds down to that surrender and just giving up.
Well,
Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, and I think she does have sort of a crisis of faith when she looks at Keller and says to him, you said you could protect us. She had faith that he was going to be able to provide. Yeah, she had faith in him that he would be able to provide, a safe environment for their family, and he let her down. That's, I think, what sort of her faith, is lost in him, and that what does that leave her with? Not much of anything else that we can see, I think, is what that goes.
I felt the two mothers' performances were absolutely believable. Like I could see both of those things happening in reality. The problem I had was the father's performances. Like just what they did. I mean, I could see a mother breaking down emotionally, and the other one basically went quiet. And then when faced with, what was going on, you could see the conflict that she was having between, this is wrong what they're doing to him, and a glimmer of hope that this might turn out to be her, to find her daughter. And she's like, okay, and let it go. And then she basically withdrew. I mean, I felt both of the mothers' performances, the characters, what they were doing were believable. I did have more of a problem with the fathers, though.
Wow, that was not my sense with the fathers at all. I mean, it particularly, I didn't really resonate with Terrence Howard.
I thought his performance was the worst.
I mean, it just was. It's like it's that old Casablanca line, I mean, if I gave it any thought, I probably would detest it. It's like, yeah. Right. But I do. I thought Hugh Jackman was, I thought he was a vessel of exactly the range of emotions and that I would feel myself in this sense. Like,
Absolutely.
I felt that rage through the course of watching this film, and so insofar as I may not have, if I play this drama out in my head, I may not actually do the things he did, but I sure as hell would have wanted to very, very badly, and that I think is what really connected me to the heart and soul of that line of this film, that I felt like it tapped into this place inside me as an audience member that really riveted me. It just I was right there with him. In particular, his explosion in the car, when he is pounding on the dashboard, saying, she's not imagining you're coming for her. She's wondering why I'm not there, not you, me. I was just, I bought the seat, but I only needed the edge, kind of a thing. I mean, it was really powerful.
I think I had a hard time buying into him, and I'm not saying that there weren't moments that were perfect. I mean, pure perfection, right, for me. But there were other times, like how he got him there. Like there were blind POV moments, right? So you don't see him grab the guy. You don't see all the steps it takes to get him into the house, and then after that, you don't see all the steps it takes to do it. And, and I understand we don't need to see it, right? But it made it seem a little bit artificial. Because I like you spend a lot more time. Well, I know, but from the cop thriller aspect of the movie, it makes it's perfect execution, but it makes it harder for me to buy into him emotionally. The Keller character, because you're spending more time over here with the detective,
right.
So
and
you're seeing him go through the so whenever they're mad at him, you're like, but he's working his ass off, leave him alone. It's like you're much more I find myself more emotionally attached to the detective than I am the father.
Well, I think that we can attribute that to Roger Deakins' cinematography on this, because I think no less than 3 or 4 times we have these just wonderful slow push-ins, the slow push-ins out into the back of Jake Gyllenhaal, starting from when he's in the Chinese restaurant and we first see him. It's just, we see him from the back and the camera just slowly, is moving towards him. And it does that at least, I think, 2 or 3 other times where he's someplace either at a desk or standing, contemplating, and the camera is just on him, slowly moving towards him. And we have so much time that is sort of thoughtful time with him, whereas I see with Keller, it's always moments of action and noise, whereas we have more moments of thoughtfulness and reflection with Detective Loki,
which to me seems like it's precisely the balance that we should strike in this sort of a detective thriller. And I found myself questioning those blind POV moments too, Mike. I mean, there's this but one of the things that I think Andy and I have been talking about at more or at greater length over recent weeks is this whole idea of the things that happen off screen and the way they are portrayed, particularly in the Coen Brothers series, and this harkened back to me to the some of the best examples of that. Of the some of the killings in No Country for Old Men or Blood Simple, that we have this sense of something happened and we get to be present for the reveal, and the reveal is better because we don't see how it got there. And that was the sense I got when he introduced Terrence Howard to the bathroom. Was holy crap.
Yeah.
But see, in that particular moment, you're in Terrence Howard's POV, right? The effect, and I'm not saying it's inappropriate for the movie, but the effect is that in the beginning of the movie, you're in the parent's head. You're like, what would you do if you were a parent and this happened to you? And this is what this is one example. This is another example of how you'd react. And as you say, maybe it goes into the second act, you find yourself being disconnected from him, from the Keller character, as who you're supposed to be sort of inhabiting, and you become more onto the detective, and then the Keller becomes a
suspect,
like a piece of evidence. Yeah, suspect, evidence, another line. I mean, it's drama. It's tense. It's thriller. But I sense the shift away from the parent as the inhabitant to the detective,
which is I think, and I'll just make this really short, Andy, because I want to be that guy. That is, I think, one of the things I really liked so much about it is that I walked into this movie based on my understanding of the trailer, really hating you guys for picking this film.
So did I.
Right, and the difference is, I think Mike still feels that way. And I really don't, because I was thrilled that this wasn't just a kidnap story. Like there was a certain sense of complexity to the story, and the dramatic resonance for me was in that the kind of tossing back and forth between Jake Gyllenhaal and Hugh Jackman.
Yeah, it's like watching the. I think the difference is, I think it would have been a much harder film. I mean, I went into the film feeling skeptical. Also, watching a film about kids get kidnapped for any parent is a very hard subject to handle, and I'm sure it is for just people in general. But it's different watching a film where it's parents hopelessly watching as a detective tries to solve a case of finding their missing children, than a film where one of the parents is actively trying to figure it out themselves. I think it in some way it like gives me a little more hope. It's like watching Taken.
I was just gonna say that. Yeah.
You're more in there, and you feel like there's more of a connect. Like, yeah, I want to be that guy. I want to be the guy who will stand up and fight and do everything I can to save my kids, come hell or high water, whether the ends do justify the means or not. I feel like that's why I don't find this as difficult a film to watch as if like I said, as if the parents just didn't do anything and just sat there, and it was really the story of the detective just doing it. And I am a bit I don't know, I didn't have the struggle that that sounds like some of you did with the connecting to the Hugh Jackman character. I stayed connected to him like through the entire film. I was so in with his performance and the ups and downs of emotion that he had, and the rage and the sorrow and just everything all the way through, the frustration. I was connected to him from beginning to end, and I was also connected to Loki. And in the scenes between the two of them, I really felt a lot of power in the way that they played those two scenes, and I loved the way that Loki handled Keller, and I loved the way that he knew how to handle parents in these sorts of situations when they had that rage and that anger, and how he could bring them down. And I just felt like the story found a nice balance between the two. And I never felt like it lost connection for me with the who I was supposed to be following. I enjoyed kind of the two worlds of it.
Yeah, me too.
Deep commentary from Pete Wright.
Well, I think though, if there's any point where I sort of lose that connection with Keller, it's at the point of his abduction, because then he starts to become the victim and becomes much, I don't want to say a more passive character, but now he's lost control. So whereas Loki always seems, always things may slip out of where he wants them to be, but he, as he said, I always need to know where everybody is. He's it's always get a sense of, even when they find Bob and all the evidence at his place, it's he's devastated, but he's been in control. It was something that was that's what happened. Whereas I feel like Keller at the end, it's like, okay, now the power's been taken away from him, and it's harder for me to stay connected to him. And even as, we get to the final shot of the film, which apparently upset a good majority of the audience that I saw it with, that it just, it leaves us with Loki, and I thought that we maintained a stronger connection to him through that last part of the...
I liked it. Sorry, go ahead, Mike.
Real quick, I didn't have an issue with the end. In fact, I almost felt like the moment when Holly pulls the gun on him, right? Mm-hmm. Spoiler alert. That it was in that moment he gained redemption, because throughout most of the movie he's unhinged. He in a lot of ways he makes bad decisions, but whatever. But like I said, I had a hard time saying, maybe I wouldn't have made the same decisions, whatever. But and you don't know kind of what he's doing, but in that moment, he becomes a victim. But in a sense, he sort of becomes redeemed in my eyes, at least, because it's like, oh, now he's got trouble, and what it does is it throws this whole thriller aspect, because of his behavior. It's like nobody knows where he is, nobody knows how it's going to be. He found out who the person was. instead of the cops or whatever. He's there doing it, and it could go completely unnoticed because he wasn't working with them. So it's like, I don't know, for some reason I felt like it was a redemption for his character, not, because maybe emotionally I was suddenly connected back to him. Now I'm feeling like, I'm feeling fearful that if he doesn't get out of this, that his daughter won't be able to.
Well, and that was the part that really jumped out to me too. And it was reminiscent of another film that I really liked a lot of elements of, The Vanishing. Do you guys remember that one?
Exactly.
Yeah, right.
I assume you're talking about the original version, not the cheesy. Okay, the cheesy Jeff Bridges, Kiefer Sutherland version, the original Dutch version.
I don't know if cheesy is even the right word to use.
Oh my gosh! But no, I thought as soon as she said, if you want to see her, you have to do this.
Yeah, this is your
you
key,
have to do the same thing.
or this is your key to get to be connected with her. And that was another one that I wanted it to. I wanted it to be a little bit more, significant, knowing that we were already at that sort of that 2 hour and 10 minute mark. I was ready for some resolution, but that was that sense that I was so, as Andy said, so connected to his character, because, that is an emotion that I absolutely understand. I will do the stupidest things for my kids.
And just jumping back into the whole thing with the ending, the thing that I like about the ending that I understand the point of, we lose track of Keller, he gets kidnapped, he all of a sudden is now not so much the focus of the film anymore, and now it all is about Loki. But the thing that I really like about that is, for the whole film, Keller has been this guy who, in a way, he's been reliant on the cops only so far as they're doing the investigation, but to the point where he just doesn't feel they're doing anything, and he forces himself to do extreme things so that he isn't reliant on anybody except himself. And through getting kidnapped at the end, even though, as Mike said, and I think Mike's exactly right, he finds redemption in that moment. He's finally proven the case. He knows where his daughter is. Unfortunately, it leaves him in the bottom of a hole that nobody has access to. But all of a sudden now we've got this moment where now Keller really does become reliant on Loki, and it's only through kind of his persistence and everything that Loki does end up finding him. And I really enjoyed the way the film ended.
Okay, so we got it. Yeah,
I think Mike would have liked that end more if the Wolverine claws had come out and he could have clawed his way right up out of that
and ripped that Trans Am apart.
Well, yeah,
just like in Wolverine. Yeah. Now that is one thing that's different in the script. In the script, at that point, when Loki's getting into the house, there's a scene where Keller has managed to climb his way up to the top, managed to sort of crack out open under the plywood, and he's pulling his way under the car, and he rips like some pipe, and he gets drenched with oil, and he's coming in the house, this just oil-drenched dark figure, and he's in the house at the same time Loki's in the house, and then it turns out it's all a dream. He's still trapped in the bottom of the pit, and I thought, oh,
yeah, that would have been way worse.
Yes, exactly. So
I think culturally, I think we're finished with "It Was a Dream" stories.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. That was one thing. As I read that, I thought that just would have totally just killed the end of this film.
Yeah. You guys. I think it was amazing that they didn't.
Amazing. I get it.
Yeah. I think they kind of got out of it a little bit.
That's the key, Pete. It was amazing.
I really hate you guys.
It was, yeah. Me too.
Let's do a. Can we do a quick?
It was great.
Keep going. No, this is what I want to know. Like, what your thought of the ending and what the audience you were with thought of the ending.
I think a lot of the result was like meh, like really, because they get out of the filmmakers get out of resolving. They get the happiest ending. Both girls get back, all the bad guys are dead, and all the parents are alive, and the cop is the guy that did it. They don't have to deal with the fact that dude's going to jail, even though they kind of talk about it with the mom. That dude's going to jail. He doesn't get to experience any of the repercussions for but his daughter's fine. Yeah, that's great. Because I remember there was a couple of moments when like when the detective was talking to Keller in the house, right? And I think the detective kind of was trying to feel him out, like, when he was in the car later on, he's like, like maybe Alex, and he was trying to maybe ask him questions like, you got Alex hidden somewhere, don't you? Or you did something to him, didn't you? Like, I almost wanted him to say, like, it'll be worse if he's dead, because he was on the moment where he might not survive what he's doing to him, right? And it's like, what's the consequence if he gets out and he's alive, or he gets or he gets back and they find the guy and he's dead? It's like a completely different consequence.
Right. And because we've had this whole experience of this, this issue of faith and what will, what your faith will drive you to do, there is this sense that we have to see some penance, even though we love this father that has taken on this more active role. And
I don't know if we needed to see the penance, though. And see, that's why I think the ending for me is perfect. If we saw the penance, I mean, yes, we all know that the penance is going to be there, but that's not what the story about. Clearly, the father doesn't care what penance he's going to have to pay. He's perfectly willing to pay the penance in order to save his daughter's life. And I think, to me, that was what the ending was about. Is like, the penance didn't matter. What mattered is that he proved that he was right. He saved his daughter's life. And I loved the simplicity of the ending. I loved where it cut off. The best reaction in my crowd was the girl in the back. And it's completely illogical, but the girl in the back who, as soon as it ends and it cuts to the title again, Prisoners, directed by blah, 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 she goes, sequel.
Oh, my gosh.
I was just like, really?
Oh, no.
No.
Steve, what was the reaction in your theater?
Yeah, there was a lot of, huh? What? No! As in disbelief of they didn't get to see, what, I thought they set up very clearly. Loki is the guy that always gets his man. He always solves every case. So it's clear he's going to solve this one. And I think, again, there's no other way to end it. I mean, again, I think the film set up so much, of it doesn't have to show us everything. When Loki comes in to the hospital with the girl, it's like we just see him coming in, and then it's like fade to black, and then it's like the next morning. Even early in the film when Hugh Jackman's calling the police, calls the police, then it's cut to several hours later of Loki getting the call on the radio, hey, we've found the RV. Well, how long have they been looking for? So it's we don't need those things. Skip the stuff that you should know, if you're an intelligent audience, what's going to happen. And
so what was horrific about that was that he almost didn't hear it, because you could hear the blowing on the whistle was so light, because you probably surmised that he was blowing for hours and hours and hours because of all the generators and the radio.
Yeah.
Nobody could hear it.
Right.
But you knew he was going to find him because his eyes locked on the.
Oh yeah.
My audience, as soon as the title card comes up, I hear stupid, and the audience starts laughing. And this is an audience that has been riveted and on the edge of their seats too for the whole 2.5 hours, and yet somehow the end didn't play for me. And this is a really uncharacteristic feeling that I have here. I find myself fantasizing a little bit about what would have happened if we hadn't seen the look of recognition on Loki's face. And that is something that I never think about. I'm always about the Hollywood popcorn ending. I love that sense. And in this case, I could have let Hugh Jackman go. After this movie, I could have been satisfied with that ending too. I agree with you though, Steve. I mean, I think they set it up. They set it up really sort of perfectly. That even we know that Loki always gets his man, and we had the conversation in the hospital. Do you think you're going to find him? And he looks up and says, "Yeah, I'm going to find him." And then he blinks really heavily again.
Right. Yeah.
So and the other thing that I have to keep asking myself, before they started digging in the dirt in the yard, wouldn't they have kind of like
stumbled
gone through the property and like maybe walked across the backyard and into the back garages and found Keller's pickup truck back there?
There was a scene with that.
I don't know how far back she drove it.
Yeah. Right. No,
I know she drove it back into the back part of the property, but I'm assuming that they would probably, go through the whole top part of the property before they start digging.
Right.
But that's, that's a minor quibble.
Right. In the script, Loki does find the truck, And there's a scene with the forensic guys have actually like gutted the Trans Am. They've like taken the seats out of the car and torn them up looking for evidence. So there were scenes like that. So director made a choice to restructure that a little bit.
Yeah,
I have a
at that
question.
point, you got to speed it up.
Right. So as I got out of there, I was thinking about the title of the film. It's not called The Maze, or it's not called, Creepy Woman Steals Children. It's called Prisoners. So who are the prisoners?
Creepy woman steals children.
I thought the going into the movie. So you thought going into the movie, I was thinking about the exact same question, and I was thinking like, well, just not even seeing the movie, I was like, well, the parents could be prisoners because they're prisoners of the situation, and
Loki's
and
a prisoner
the
of the
girls,
system.
Exactly. I actually thought that they had chosen that name because there could be so many thoughts about it, so many ways to interpret it.
Yeah, and I think I came out that way. I mean, in a way, because of that maze mentality, or the maze mindset that these parents imbued on these children, and everything seemed like everyone really kind of was prisoners in their own way.
Right.
Yeah.
Hey, Andy, stop trying to make that maze thing work.
Yeah.
Let's do. We've been rambling on quite some time. Let's do a little speed round and give some final highs, lows, and thoughts on the film. Mike.
Oh,
yep,
shoot.
you're first.
Okay, so I felt the whole movie was, and maybe as a father, we don't deal with this as much. It was like emotional torture. I felt that as much torture as they did to the character Alex, we were basically experiencing as an audience just watching the movie. The way I thought it was masterful, the way they played with emotional highs and lows like a violin, right up like the through the end of the movie, the part where the chase, not the chase, but where the cop detective is driving the girl to the hospital, and you're just going through your mind up and down like he can't see. If he crashes, they're not going to know what they put in there because he's got the vial, and they're not. I was on the edge of my chair for that whole thing. I felt it was really well done as where they kind of would screw around with the viewers. The downside is I think they just had too much. It almost felt like it was an editing room floor mistake. They had lots of these distractions. I think some of them didn't get resolved, and some of them were distracting. In that sense because they were unresolved, like the symbols or the tattoos on the detective and things like that. But overall, I really enjoyed it.
Excellent, Andy.
I didn't have really any of those problems, and I maybe have the benefit of having seen it twice, so maybe I've had more time to kind of think about it. But I did find that the story as a whole, seeing it, everything really connected for me, and I felt it was very assured filmmaking. The pacing I thought was really well paced. The director really knew when to take his time. He didn't feel the need to resort to these jump scares, create these kind of false emotional moments just to tug at the heartstrings. I think he knew how to handle the subject and the genre. It was Roger Deakins absolutely should finally win his Oscar for the stunning look of this film. I mean, it turns this rainy Pennsylvania town at Thanksgiving into just the most frightening of places. The performances, I think, all really hit home. Very strong performances all the way through, except Terrence Howard, who I felt a little false at times, but everyone else, I think, really worked well for me. It is definitely a film to think about. There's a lot of questions, a lot of things you really have to kind of piece together on your own, but I really liked that about the film. Overall, I would highly recommend it.
Excellent. Steve?
Yeah, I'm going to echo Andy on that. I mean, so many great things about this film. Roger Deakins' work is amazing. It just, elevates, this fine film already. I think at a 2.5 hour runtime, the pacing just kept me moving along through this. Great story, great performances. Only, if I was going to nitpick one little thing, is when Detective Loki gives his business card to the girl at the clothing store, I think.
Oh, I
in the
saw
back
that
of my
too.
head, I said, okay, so now we're setting up where he can get a phone call at whatever time is convenient for the story to either reveal his location if he's hiding, to distract him from seeing something. So it was just that where I kept thinking, okay, ooh, here's a really tense moment. Is his phone going to ring to just, derail this?
Which
and it did.
Which it does.
minor nitpicky thing because it's, but everything else, I mean, there's so much, the strength of it, how everything connects together, all these stories woven together in such a way that just craftfully done of introducing information that you then see again in a different light later on as everything weaves together. To me, this really reminded me of Zodiac and just a really complex story with a lot of characters over, although over a much shorter period of time, just very, very satisfying.
I agree on almost all points. I think for me the real highlight here is Hugh Jackman, and I hope he gets broader recognition for this film. I don't know if it necessarily means some sort of an award, but I felt deeply connected to his portrayal of this father in this film. It really I've been thinking about it. It captures that sort of dark inner lizard brain response to how I would respond to this situation. I think it was very powerful. I like Jake Gyllenhaal too, and it did harken back to me to Zodiac as well, Steve, but not as powerful as his role I think was in Zodiac, and it was good. It was worse than Zodiac, better than Donnie Darko. So I think
well, now he's got another film coming out with the same director.
Excellent.
They shot a film before this where Jake Gyllenhaal plays a guy who sees his exact twin in some film and tries to track the guy down. I think the trailer just came out and the title.
Enemy?
Yes. Enemies.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yes.
I'm going to check it out.
So yeah, these two got to work together before Prisoners and develop that sort of director-actor relationship.
Awesome.
So I'm kind of looking forward to that.
Well, absolutely. I think the deepest, or just to wrap up my final thoughts, I think that the thing we didn't talk about specifically was they just absolutely crushed the casting of two of the creepiest dudes on screen right now with David Dastmalchian and Paul Dano. I mean, both of these guys were equally horrifyingly, awkwardly creepy, and to Andy's point, they didn't really rely on the jump scares, and yet the kind of thriller horror feeling that I got watching, Dastmalchian in skulking through these houses, taking the girls' clothes, was exactly the feeling I wanted out of this film, and I think they just nailed it.
And I can't believe none of us brought it up yet, but also the moment when Dano is walking the dog and lifts it up and nearly chokes him. That got the biggest reaction out of the crowd.
It did.
It was horrified everybody that he was doing that. Talk about just one of the creepiest characters.
Those little breadcrumbs, they cried they only cried when I left them. I mean, those little moments that we get to see that are driving Jackman's character crazy, I think just adds to the depth and the texture of their relationship, and finally really gives you that payoff when he seals him up in the shower. I thought that was very strong. The cinematography obviously was great all the way through, but speaking specifically of the shower, I love the eyeball and mouth spotlights. Those were incredibly creepy. I thought they just did it.
Especially that, what is that, just giant red eye?
Yes, oh God, it was just horrifying. To me, I think the biggest weakness, in terms of the visual elements of the film, was in the editing, weirdly. I mean, Andy, you made a point about how, there was some great kind of character strength between the detective and the dad when they were on screen together, and to me, I think the actors themselves, acquitted themselves well, but it was just ended up being such a banal back and forth, more like a 60 Minutes interview cut together than anything that gave me any sense of texture on the screen. I found it really bogged down whenever those two were on screen together, and I found that a bit distracting. But overall, I deeply like this film, and it is, I think it's a blunt instrument film around this topic, and I think it is more powerful as a result of it. It is not delicate in the way it handles this subject, and I have this weird feeling that in 5 years we'll get together somehow and say, gosh, what is a great film that's totally underappreciated? Prisoners. I think this is going to be one we're going to want to try to remember and probably won't do a very good job of it.
Well, here's a question for all of you. How many of you would put this on a I will watch this again list?
No, why are you asking that
Yeah.
question?
I think Mike's already on the record saying he will never watch this film again.
I will never watch this movie again. It's just a really, really hard one for me because, and for because of parent of children, it was a it was emotional torture, and I think that they knew what they were doing, and I don't necessarily know if I want to put myself through that again.
I would like to amend the question. How many of you walked out of the theater and said, "You know who really needs to see this? My wife."
Not me.
Nope. Yeah, my wife already told me that she refuses to ever watch this after having just seen the trailer. It's like there's no way I will ever watch that film.
My wife literally was going, "Why are you crazy in going to watch this movie?"
Yeah.
I'm
It's hard because Andy and Steve told us to, and so
Yeah.
let's go ahead and rank it. Can we jump into that?
Sure.
If we are ready, you can find us at flickchart.com/thenextreel. Flickchart.com/thenextreel. You'll find all of our stack rankings of all of our shows, and all the films we've hit. I think this is going to be number 114. Is that right? Somewhere in there.
This will be 110.
Or
you're always a little high.
We're cruising up into the 170s, and I'm very excited about that. So.
All right, here we go. Prisoners or Thank You for Smoking?
Prisoners.
Prisoners, yeah.
Yeah, I think I would do Prisoners. I know Pete wants to go with Thank You
That's
for
why
Smoking.
I was silent. I just wanted to see. I wanted to see where the wind was blowing. I'll agree.
Yeah. All right. Hold on. Receiving your choice. Prisoners or Hot Fuzz?
Oh my gosh.
Okay, so we hear you guys do this on your podcast all the time. And you guys have trouble with this too. What exactly is would we put it in would we watch it again? Do we think it was a better movie? What are we doing?
It's really your own ranking. I mean, I think here on the show it's a mix of both. I mean, I think there's always going to be a mix of both. I mean, you look at one that may be a better film, but you really like one better, and so you probably would pick that one. But in another case, the better film may win out because you're like, well, no, I really have to go with the better film in this one. It's
right.
I think it changes.
I think
it's constantly malleable.
I would say Prisoners.
In a case of Prisoners versus Hot Fuzz, Andy is always going to choose Taxi Driver. So we can just take that as a foregone conclusion.
Exactly.
I will go with Prisoners on this one. As much as I love Hot Fuzz, and I've talked about it way too much on the show, I still would go Prisoners. It's more solid. I mean, it's just a really solid piece of film.
Well, and to your point,
I would watch Hot Fuzz. I would watch Hot Fuzz an infinite number of times before more.
Oh,
than,
yeah.
But it doesn't. It doesn't. And this is one of those other pieces of that sort of after you get through the gut reaction of how we rank these things, it is which film really forces you to ask the deeper and more important questions, and that for me is Prisoners, hands down.
Yeah, there you go.
Was that a unanimous one on that?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. All right, Prisoners or The World's End?
This is a tough one, actually. I feel like we
I
asked some very deep questions.
I haven't heard the episode yet for World's End, but I'm going to vote Prisoners.
Are we allowed to vote when we haven't seen both?
You can't vote if you haven't seen it.
So it's
I've seen the movie. I haven't heard the podcast.
Yeah, but you've seen the movie. Okay. That's fine.
Yeah, that's fine, as long as you've seen it. I'm a little torn on this one too, Pete. I feel like The World's End actually has a lot of stuff going on in it, and I really enjoyed that about it, and I think that they really stepped up their game above Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz. And I don't know. I mean, Prisoners to me is something that is really kind of an award caliber film, and I really feel that it's way up there. The World's End is not something that's going to be getting knock at the door come award season necessarily, but I probably would watch The World's End more. I don't know. I'm torn.
This is to me, it's a context argument. I'm not really excited to watch Prisoners again, even though it captures something I think an important kind of emotional reaction. But The World's End is both a film I deeply enjoy. I found myself, I like it on a very superficial level. It's kind of fun and dumb, and it gets me asking some really interesting questions of myself at this stage, kind of contextually in my life. So I'm going to vote World's End on this one.
Man, and it's just between you and me, so.
Well, Mike has seen him. Mike has voted Prisoners.
Oh yeah, Mike voted for Prisoners.
So you are actually the tiebreaker now.
All right.
Wait a minute. What Steve?
He can't vote. He hasn't seen World's End.
I was going to say, oh, you can't even vote. All right.
No.
Now, see, my deal about this is that, well, so mathematically, since I would watch Rush an infinite number of times before, more than I'm going to watch Prisoners again, that mathematical side of the equation sort of blocks itself out, and I come down to which was the better made movie, which was the movie that I felt had more craftsmanship, more work, more better performances into it. I liked Hot Fuzz, I liked World's End, but these guys should get more credit for this movie. That's where I rank it.
It's so hard. I'm going to go World's End though.
Oh,
that
Boom.
is
and
wrong.
then he just drops the mic. That's right.
Yeah. Walks away.
Nelson out.
I completely agree, but looking at it's tough because when it's always a challenge, and this is always the argument come award season, is the drama versus comedy, and do they deserve more recognition for the powerful emotional performances they gave than the people who really did some creative, energetic, emotional performances in a comedy? And
we're not
I
the
think
Academy.
Yeah, but we're not. They're not voting on this, and so for me, I still think that Edgar Wright, Simon Pegg, Nick Frost, all the rest of the guys in that film gave solid performances all the way through. It's just in a totally different contextual situation, and so I'm voting for that one. That's all there is to it. All right, next up is Prisoners or Dark City. I would do Prisoners on this one.
Yeah.
I'm waiting for Pete.
Dang, I'm waiting for
I
you.
enjoy Dark City. It's got some flaws in it.
I'm pulling a Pete on you. I'm waiting to see where your wind blows.
I'll show you where my wind blows.
Because I'm seeing if my vote's even going to count.
I am going to I'm going to go for Prisoners on this one too.
Wow.
I also am going to go for Prisoners.
All right, Prisoners or The Prestige. Oh, Jackman.
Jackman versus Jackman.
I still going Prisoners.
I feel like this gives us.
I love The Prestige.
Oh,
though.
yeah.
I mean, that's just such a, again, when you talk about structure of the story and the arcs of these characters.
Yeah.
The beauty of this one, though, is that we can vote for either with no guilt.
I vote Hugh Jackman.
I always stand with Hugh. I'm gonna vote for The Prestige on this one.
So am I.
Yeah.
All right, 3 against 1. Prestige rules out. The Prisoners or The French Connection?
French Connection. Stop.
French Connection. Yeah.
You really gotta.
I won't even vote.
Prisoners or Being John Malkovich?
Ooh, Andy, where do you come down on this? Since I know you're about to go to bed in your Being John Malkovich sheet set.
How did you know?
I would say Prisoners.
Are you in my mind right now watching?
I would say Prisoners.
I would agree with Mike. I enjoy Malkovich, but again, there's just some, I don't know. I have some issues with Malkovich.
I'm going Prisoners on this one too.
Doesn't matter what you say.
It doesn't matter.
I'm interested.
Push the button.
I am interested, however. Come on, Andy.
Andy, push the button.
Andy,
push the button.
No, I think I'm going with Prisoners, but I feel guilty about it. All right, number 19 out of 110.
Oh,
that's
you guys. Good. I think now, Andy.
Where does that put that taxi driver? Where does that put it next to Taxi Driver, Andy? Huh?
Well, with Pete's vote on Taxi Driver, unfortunately, Taxi Driver is not that high on
Everybody
our
hear that giant sucking sound?
Yes.
Hey, but actually, where does this rank against other film board episodes? I believe this is the top, right?
Probably is.
Let me look.
It's better than Prometheus.
let's see. The highest one would
stretching.
be. Yes, it is a prestige or prisoners. Sorry, prisoners, and then World War Z would be next.
I don't want to say the curse is broken, but I'm just saying I'm optimistic for next month's show.
I am too.
So one little movie connection trivia
Please
note
do.
as we're wrapping up. Jake Gyllenhaal and Melissa Leo were in a Homicide on the Street episode.
Really?
Oh.
And which ironically was directed by Jake Gyllenhaal's father.
Oh wow!
So little thing there for you.
I love
cool.
that. Do we know we have not decided what we're going to be doing next month? Is that correct?
We have not,
So
and
we're going to leave
we'll
that a
figure
big
that
secret.
out.
Thanks again, everybody, for joining us for this show on Prisoners. This may be the linchpin episode where the curse is broken, and we're looking forward to next month's new release Film Board episode. You can find us, as always, at thenextreel.com. You can just jump over to the Film Board. You can see all the other episodes that we've done as a team. Head over to the blog and read some of the great posts from the goodly, kindly Mr. Sarmento himself. And always join the conversation at facebook.com/thenextreel. You can subscribe to us on iTunes. We appreciate kind comments and many stars. Those are always nice to receive. And I think that's it. Again,
we did good here, man.
We did good here, man. Absolutely.
We did really good here.
Good work. Thanks, everybody. Steve Sarmento, Andy Nelson, Mike Evans. On behalf of all of these yahoos, I'm Pete Wright, and we'll catch you next time on the Film Board.